Pop quiz. What do these Pokémon have in common? In Generation 3, all of these Pokémon face left on the summary screen, while others face right. This is because these Pokémon have asymmetrical designs, meaning that they are not the same when mirrored. This is opposed to Pokémon who are symmetrical, who are mirrored on the summary screen, and face the right. The full list of Pokémon in Gen 3 that face the left on the summary screen include Poliwag, Poliwhirl, Poliwrath, Kingler, Electabuzz, Croconaw, Igglybuff, Politoed, Unown, Teddiursa, Elekid, Sneasel, Roselia, Spinda, Zangoose, Seviper, Absol, and Deoxys. However, there are some Pokémon with asymmetrical designs who are mirrored on the summary screen. Some of these Pokémon include Staryu, Sudowoodo, Magby, and Togepi. It's so strange to me how they're able to catch something like the swirl on Igglybuff's forehead, but not Togepi's spots. But there is one Pokémon with a symmetrical design that is left unmirrored in these games, that being Deoxys. Now, Deoxys in speed form is asymmetrical, however, all of his sprites are left unmirrored. This is opposed to Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, when only his speed form is unmirrored. Other Pokémon introduced in Diamond and Pearl that are unmirrored include Torterra, Chimchar, Monferno, Budew, Roserade, Magmortar, and Togekiss. Now what if I told you there were some Pokémon in Gen 3 that were mirrored that were later unmirrored in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum? These Pokémon include Magby and Staryu. So they could unmirror old Pokémon. Unmirrored Togekiss, but not Togepi or Togetic. And honestly, I don't know why. Now you might have realized I've been saying Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum and not Generation 4. This is because in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, all Pokémon are facing the left. And it stayed that way through Generation 5. And with the introduction of 3D models in Gen 6, they could just simply rotate the model and not have to flip a sprite. But interestingly, in Generations 1 and 2, all Pokémon are mirrored regardless of if they're asymmetrical or not. And I find it very interesting how they prioritized unmirroring some Pokémon, but not others. And how this entire thing could have been avoided if they just left every Pokémon unmirrored, like they are in the PC screen and in the Pokédex. Now, I'm not the first to say this, but Generation 1 might have had some iffy sprite work. But I feel like this topic has been talked about to death. You all know about Golbat's tongue, and you might have even seen that artwork of Hitmonchan's sprite looking like a Togekiss watching a Doduo poop. But what really gets me about Generation 1 sprites are the colors in Yellow version. Non-Japanese versions of Yellow had Game Boy Color support, adding color to all of the Pokemon sprites. But some of the colors they decided to pick are kinda questionable. Let's take Rattata for example. He's kind of a brown-green color, which is totally different from the purple he's supposed to be. And it's not like they couldn't use purple. Venonat and Nidoking use purple. Well then you might think the colors are dependent on what type they are? But that's not the case either. Chansey is also a normal type, like Rattata, but is pink. Well then it might be dependent on their evolution line. That color can kinda fit for Raticate, but this isn't the case either. Execute and Exeggutor use completely different colors, but are the same evolution line. So why is Rattata like this? I couldn't tell you. And Rattata isn't even the only example of this. Look at Mewtwo, or Ditto, or Cubone. There's a lot of Pokemon like this. Tell me, is there any reason why the entire Dragonite line had to be a different color? When Dratini and Dragonair could have just been the same? I really don't know why they're like this. It could have been the localization team that gave them these colors, but that kinda seems like a stretch. This whole thing makes me avoid playing Yellow on anything other than an original Game Boy, so that I can have it in black and white and not these mishmash colors. But even then it's not perfect. Look at the back sprites. Each revision of Gen 1 gave the Pokemon new front sprites, but kept the back sprites the same as the original. Which leads to instances like Charmeleon, where in Yellow version, the front and back sprites look like completely different creatures, but taking a glance over at the green sprite, yeah, they look pretty similar. So in Yellow version, the Pokemon you're fighting against look really good, but the Pokemon you use look like this. Now this isn't really a sprite oddity, it's more of a model oddity, but in Pokémon Stadium, Electabuzz has 6 fingers on each hand, when he should only have 5. In no game before or after this does he have 6 fingers, which might lead you to think what happened to them. Well, here's my little game theory. He grew 2 extra fingers and gave them to Mr. Mime. Starting in Fire Red and Leaf Green, Mr. Mime now has 5 fingers on each hand, when previously he only had 4. In Emerald version, his sprite is similar to Ruby and Sapphire's, but edited to give him an extra finger. This isn't the only Pokemon in Emerald version to get an updated sprite from Ruby and Sapphire. Some of them just got new colors like Wartortle and Caterpie, while some of them like Snorlax look completely different, even different from their Fire Red and Leaf Green sprite, while Kadabra just looks a little bit different. This one is most notable in the stomach area. But most of them stayed the same as the Ruby and Sapphire sprites, which look kind of weird for some of them. Like, look at Rattata and Pidgey. I don't know why, but they just look off to me. But I think the most egregious example is Kingler. Just looking at Kingler's sprite on its own, it actually looks really good. That is until you face one in battle, and it looks like it's holding itself up by its claw. Now, I might cut them some slack for this. A lot of the sprites that look bad are for Pokemon that aren't even in the Hoenn, so you have to go out of your way to interact with Fire Red or Leaf Green to even see these sprites. But hey, if you do this, you'll realize that Fire Red and Leaf Green have different sprites for Brenton and May, and in Emerald version, Red and Leaf have different sprites as well. I don't see many people talk about this, but the likely reason is to make these sprites better fit the art style of their respective games. And while trading, you might realize that Teddiursa uses a different sprite from the Hoenn games and Fire Red and Leaf Green. This is the only non-Kanto Pokemon that does this. Why? Again, I don't know. Now let's have one final thing to cap this video off. Again, it's not sprite related, but it is model related. It's pretty well known that in Scarlet and Violet, a lot of old Pokemon had their models updated. But there was one Pokemon that had an updated model before Scarlet and Violet. Look at Glameow in X and Y. Now, look at Glameow in Sun and Moon. Notice how the ears look a little bit different. As far as I know, this is the only Pokemon to have an updated model before Scarlet and Violet. Let me know if you liked this video. It's a little bit different from the other videos I've made. There's certainly more I can talk about with Pokemon sprites, so let me know if you'd like a part 2 or maybe a different video in the same style as this one. But that's about it for now.